Hey everybody, this is Jim at SP500chart.com. It's May 22nd, 2014, about 4:15 after the close. And we're going to take a look at the chart after I remind you that the website and the video are for educational purposes only, and that nothing stated at the side or in the video is intended to be used as investment advice. I control lines on charts, but you have to draw your own conclusions from your own research and make investment decisions that are suitable for your personal financial situation. I am not a licensed financial professional. I'm just a guy who draws lines on charts. So let's take a look. I mentioned yesterday that it looked like the S&P was likely poised to make another run at resistance, wherever it might be found. And we've really got two likely candidates. We've got this rising trend line right here, and we reached that trend line today a little bit later in the morning and kind of hugged it for a good part of the day, then started to back off of it with, looks like probably about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour or so to go in the session today. Now, we do have what I would expect to be even stronger resistance up here at about 1903, let's call it. And so I guess, the only thing I can say here is at some point one would expect either the market to get over this 1903, make that leg up to the mid or even high 1900s, or we're going to break down and we're going to start heading back down to the low 1700s. That's interesting because that's about roughly, I figure that's about a 250 point swing. So that means I think it's pretty important that we try to get this right, because we either go here or we go here, because we've been in this range now for almost a full quarter. If you look March, April, May, plus the latter half of April. So either we get up over this line here, in which case we would be looking at the depth of this pattern, and we would measure that as I think a realistic target. We get close to 2000. We actually end up at about 1995. Or the markets break down and we end up in the 1730s. The good news is that we are over this trend line right here. We had follow through to stay over this line, and that tells me that this line, much like this one right here, we got over it by a little bit, but then when we got over it by a significant margin, this line got turned into support. And that's where we got this bounce here. I would expect this line, if we get just a little bit more, this line should also have been turned over to support. Now, you see back here, it didn't last very long, but this was not a technically significant amount. That was only about at the time of the breakout, it was only about a 9 to 10 point margin, which now that we're up in the 1800s, that's just a little bit more than 0.5%. We have a little bit more margin underneath us today, still not 1%. Just interesting to note, and I'll point it out again, we did hit this line, and at least for right now, this line is giving us some resistance. So let's see if the S&P can get the strength to overcome some of these trend lines, because it's a real bird's nest where we are right now. And what do I mean by that? I mean there's little trend lines drawn all over everywhere. If we go back and look at a 2-hour chart, You can see, for example, when we were back here in January and February, it was an extremely simple situation. We'd come off a high, we'd fallen down in this little channel here, and once we get out of the channel, the word would be we should go up. But this was a fairly simple situation. We did have some twists and turns, but we didn't have them to the degree that we have been seeing them lately. Finally, just one more thing to add. We do have rising trendline support right here, and we've got rising trendline support right here. So it's going to be real interesting what happens in the next 3 to 4 weeks, because some of our support lines are going to start having, and it may be a little further out than that, but the point is these rising trend lines right here have an intersection with this 1900-ish line right here. So at some point in the weeks ahead, 4, 5, maybe 6 weeks ahead, something's got to give. We have to either get up over this line, or we start breaking down some of our trend lines that we've been bouncing off of pretty well for the past few months. So guys, there's your video. Let me just show you one more quick thing. I'm not that concerned about this, but you can see that we had a little rising support line here, and that did break this afternoon. But this is such a short-term thing. Often we will see lines like this break, only to find out at some point in time that we actually were in the process of forming a channel. So that's not a grave concern by any stretch right now. I'll go ahead and keep that on the chart, but I'll make it very light, just so we know it's there. So guys, thanks for watching. Thank you for your support, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed. One of these weeks, I'm older than probably most of you, but I remember Jackie Gleason. I was a little kid watching Jackie Gleason, and it was a show called The Honeymooners, and he would have fights with his wife, and he would kind of wind his fist up and look at her and say, "One of these days, Alice, one of these days." Well, that's kind of the way I feel right now. One of these days, we're going to leave this area behind. So I will certainly look forward to it whenever that day might be. Thanks for watching. Take care.